Um, Hey, Allie, I'm going to attempt to promote you. Here's where I fall very short. you're not, are you promoted? No. It's like a council hearing. Mary J. How do I? Okay, I got this. No, didn't work. Okay, 1 second. Oh, there we go. Did it work?
I can be unmuted now, but I still can't see. Like, I can't get on video.
Why? Oh my gosh, thank you for coming early so I can figure this out. Oh, got it. Got it. I think I did it.
You did it. I'm sorry, I'm staffing the council member too, so I need to do one thing.
That's okay. Are you promoted to full panelist? You can be visualized and heard.
Okay.
I hope.
Yep, that's the deal usually.
And oh shoot, I should pause the recording when I just joked about Mary J.
Is essentially foster care in DC. And so I will be chatting with you guys a little bit later about the council members' priorities as it comes to education. And my favorite movie is Die Hard, which is a Christmas movie. Thanks.
Great, I'm just gonna wrap it around. Commissioner Lehman Morales.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Dieter. I'm the commissioner for 1A02, Northwest Columbia Heights between Spring Place and Union Street. So I border immediately to the north of Commissioner Miller's district. Favorite movie? I'll just say the most recent movie I saw that I really liked, and I've seen twice now. The new movie Judas and the Black Messiah. I highly recommend it. It's really good. Gives a good look into the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party in the 70s. So if you haven't got a chance to, it's really good. It's on what's that called? HBO Max, but it's also I think in theaters. But obviously that's not more of an option.
Great, Commissioner Sanchez.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Victoria Sanchez. I'm the commissioner for 1B05. So that is Meridian Hill Park down to U Street, up Florida Avenue, over to 14th Street. So little neighbor to the south here, joining kind of cross representation for ANCs. My favorite movie is Dr. Strangelove. I work in the nuclear policy space during my J job, so it kind of goes with the territory.
I'm sorry, I've got to have a follow-up question to that. Did you see Chernobyl?
Yes, my dissertation was actually on nuclear accidents. So yes, I will put a plug here that Chernobyl is actually very accurate. There are a few things that are not quite so, but it's very good. It gets the stamp of approval.
Great, so I can put it forth to my kids as an actual educational experience and like pretty close to accuracy. Great. Well, Bill, I'm going to wrap around to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Brown. I'm a former ANC commissioner, former council staffer, and currently work for a senior community engagement manager at the United Negro College Fund here in DC, and specifically work on K through 12 issues.
Great.
I guess my fun fact, I can't think of like favorite movie right about now, but I totally spaced on it being St. Patrick's Day and wearing green. So what I am rocking is my Captain Crunch red Lands' End pullover.
Great. I am actually going to let our co-chair in real quick. Sorry, I apologize. And while I do that, Renee, you are next.
Hello,
Hi,
hi.
I'm
My name is
Brown. Oh,
Ramon.
sorry.
Renee. Oh, well, I'm Renee Davis. I'm a member of the PAVE, Parents Advocating for Voices of Education, for Ward 1, along with Christine. I kind of spaced out on the movie thing. It's hard to hold my attention that long, but my favorite Pixar short film is called Loop, and it's an animated featurette, little teeny vinaigrette featurette about the perspective of a young girl who's a nonverbal autistic kid at camp, and it's actually literally my favorite little movie thing because in honor of my daughter, I have a 16-year-old teenager with autism as well. Her name is Alexa, and it's in honor of my son, Michael, who's also a 12-year-old with autism. And we really like the little featurette because it's so realistic about the experience of like being on water, being in nature, sensory friendly kind of stuff. But I'll hope I'm over in Georgia and Lamont in that part of the Port 1 community. And I'll mute my voice, and I may periodically turn my camera on and off a bit as I move around and get the kids ready to get the next thing going.
Understandable. I may also end up popping out. I don't know where my kids are right now, and I think they've eaten, but that's all I can guarantee. And Commissioner Brown, who is also a chair of this committee, I'm going to let you wrap us up because, of course, I'm going to not put myself in this. Actually, just kidding. I'm Christine Miller. I'm a commissioner for 1A05, which is the area around DCUSA, between 16th and 14th, and of course Irving and Newton, and abuts Commissioner Lehman Morales. And I will just say I grew up with indie films and am a huge David Lynch, so Reservoir Dogs is my favorite movie. And it does not reflect my parenting style at all. Too much. So Commissioner Brown.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Brown, ANC 1A10 Commissioner. I need to keep my camera off because I'm multitasking right now, but I missed the instructions in the beginning. Christine, can you
We are just
repeat them?
introducing him because I'm not good. I'm just throwing out for an icebreaker. Favorite movie. It's the best I can do. Sorry, it's not very clever.
Favorite movie ever or recently?
I would say whatever strikes your fancy right now.
All right. Well, during COVID, this is not really a movie. I think it's more of a series on HBO, but I became a fan of Watchmen. I'm not a DC comic fan, but I really loved it. I thought it was well done, and just loved Regina King's debut in this particular series. So, yep.
Okay, so as much as I'll be taking notes on tonight's education issues, I'm also getting a list of movies. So Watchmen is on it. So I'm going to go ahead. It looks like we have most everyone who said they were able to join. We are recording now, and I do have some other folks who are really excited to have you and or have you, Raleigh, here, and to also hear more about Councilmember Nadeau's priorities and also the work that you're doing for education and the efforts that you're doing around that. Because while the budget is certainly a pressing issue right now, we know that it's much bigger and it certainly bookends all of this other work. So really excited to have you share that. I'd sort of given Raleigh a couple examples of things that our commission, that our committee and commission has focused on regarding mental health, of course, out of school time, and as a personal interest, and when I'm really just been amazed at Councilmember Nadeau's efforts is like every single year she manages to just find money like, and not just change under the couch. She just pulls it out, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about money she's gonna, you know, pull out from under the couch cushions and hopefully from behind Bill Gates' ears, because it's been amazing every year and super impressive. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, commissioners, for having me. And thank you so much for sending along a few bullet points that I can talk about, because as Allie knows, I can kind of talk about education like all day. I spend my day getting pretty deep in the weeds, chatting with advocates, colleagues, and honestly just finding money. So I think, I guess we'll start like the Sound of Music at the very beginning. And your first bullet was about mental health supports in our schools and direct services. Okay, so I would say that school-based mental health is definitely one of the council members' top priorities. So right now we have clinicians in about 66% of all district public schooling. And so the ask from a few advocates, and I think will be council-wide, will be an additional 6.4 million, and this will be an increase to reoccurring funding to the school behavioral health program, and this will allow an additional 80 schools to have clinicians at the schools, and so that would make 100% of all district schools, which is DCPS and public charter, to have these supports. That increase, I think, is pretty cheap. That would yield heavy support. But also we're going to ask for, and along with other council members are asking for, a 4% increase to the UPSFF. And these two ask, and I think we have a really good chance of getting them funded, fully funded. Even with the pandemic last year, the mayor was still able to do 3% and still keep the SIP on par. And to be honest, at the beginning of the pandemic, I really didn't know what kind of money we'd be working with, but I was actually pretty impressed that she very rarely touches education, and if anything, it's like a increase. And all council members are pretty keen on seeing that increase. So with that additional 6.4 million, again, pretty cheap to have 100% mental health supports, then with the UPSFF and the comprehensive staffing model, every school will then have additional funds to hire specific supports that they need. So this can include librarians or additional clinicians, depending on the exact needs of your school. Mm-hmm. And so I have a couple talking points about that. If you want to get like really deep into mental health supports, there's a couple different tiers we can talk about, or I can continue on with more budget. I guess with respect to UPSFF, childcare, I guess we're gonna like transition into like there's three kind of like main priorities, and they're all number one.
Right.
So I don't like to say that priorities. One, number two, number three, they're all number one. And so number two is child care supports, and Councilmember Nadeau is very keen on making sure that all child care facilities make it through the pandemic. And we were very enthused that last week the mayor announced a $16 million increase to sustain the district's child care sector. So from this 16 million, around 10 million of that, around 10.7 will be a new grant program. $3 million for targeted assistance for specific facilities that are really struggling. And then 3 additional million to, it's a road to recovery expansion program, which is already an existing program. All subsidy payments have continued through the pandemic, but I think this increase will also add. We've gotten a few calls to add an additional 60 million for all childcare sectors. I'm not sure if that ask will be met. I'm not sure if that ask is available in the budget, but this will heavily go to the pay parity for childcare workers in that sector. Just a couple other things. I'm not sure how interested this group is about healthy steps, healthy futures, but she has already asked or presented to the mayor that this is one of her priorities to expand the new site, which is very cheap, actually, 300,000. Healthy futures to increase staffing, 675,000. Immigrant legal justice programs, which is 5 million. DC Cares, 25 million. Again, these are just like ask. And then I think, let me go back to your youth. Okay, so still on youth. All right. And then with respect to finding money, my boss is so great at finding money. You're completely right. And so we have a few revenue generators. One is a sugary drinks bill. It's not a bill that I've been working on. It's one my colleagues have. But basically it would increase, I need to connect with Amir, but it's like, I think a few cents per drink. And that funding would heavily go again back into school-based mental health and also birth to 3 to fully fund that. I think we have a lot of federal funding coming our way as well. The budget has been delayed, so the budget office has a moment to connect and calculate, frankly, what those figures can look like. Simple, like, for example, when I asked the budget office, can you give me a total of birth to 3? I mean, it takes 3 weeks because they have to pull it out of several different committees, several different activities and programs, and there's no kind of like one chunk. It goes in a lot of different directions. So it just takes a while to put that together. So we have, and I think one more item you wanted to talk about was homeless services, but I'm gonna let Allie go into that because she knows a lot more than I do. I'm kind of like the ed health person. One thing I want to leave you guys with is kind of like an overall idea about the budget process. And I know you guys are very well plugged in with everything. And with our new budget schedule is on the council website. So we're still targeting for an April 22nd release of the mayor's budget. The next day she'll have a briefing on her priorities and basically a very, very top bird's eye view about the budget. And then we'll kick off our committee hearings on budget oversight. One thing I wanted to let you guys know is May 5th will be the education cluster for public witness testimony. And I'm sure everyone knows already, but please sign up to testify. I think, well, I know all the voices are, it's helpful for us. So we can know what's happening in the community because for me, at least, I'm so removed as a ledge staffer. Allie is incredibly plugged in, but it's so helpful for me and my colleagues on the ledge side to hear from you guys of like what's going on and what kind of conversations you've had and what your personal experience has been dealing with schools and in the ward. Let's see, I think I want to talk about one more.
Raleigh, you had one question in the chat from
Ooh.
Commissioner Brown. If you could speak more about the pay parity in the childcare sector, how will this be achieved through this budget?
Yeah, so we don't know. So these are all kind of like our budget wish lists that I quickly went through. And this was, Councilmember has written a letter to the mayor outlining her wish list, basically ideas, items that she would like to fund. And these are all coming from advocacy groups that have contacted her and have laid out why they want that funding. I don't know where that
Mhm.
60 million could come from, but it's out there. And I, you know, I'm not sure what the best way is to do this, Commissioner. I can maybe loop you in. There's an organization called Under 3 DC, and they are excellent at data crunching with respect to pay parity, like this one specific area. And I would love to connect you with them because they're so knowledgeable and super friendly. Would that work, Commissioner? Or I wanna make sure
Yeah, I'll
information
just,
you need.
yeah, I was just wondering what the commission, what the council members' thoughts are in terms of parity. And I know I can tell you my wish list. I don't know if there's enough money in the budget to do it, but I
Yeah.
would love to align childcare workers' salaries with pre-K 3 and 4. If we're really trying to achieve parity, we really need to shift workers from wages to salaries to help really address economic mobility and also get them in a place where they can, gain benefits primarily and hopefully through paid family leave. So I really would like for us to kind of move childcare in that direction, particularly when we have worked so hard to advance the early care and educational workforce, improve the quality, and raise the educational restrictions for childcare workers, which I think we're first in the district to do that.
Yeah, and I don't want to go back to our last oversight hearing. Councilmember appeared and asked Aussie a few questions regarding this. Basically, what could that look like for increase the salary? And it's been I can pull it up, but it's been a few years since the childcare sector has seen an increase. And there is not just my boss, but there's other council members that asked the same questions of the interim Superintendent Young. And their answer, I'm sure you saw her. It's basically it was we're waiting for federal funding to come in, and then from there see where the disparity is and where we can draw money, because Aussie is expecting a large bump from federal funding very, very soon.
Yeah, and the early care and education workforce is quite wide. And, I think in order for us to achieve parity in a private sector part of, like this, then we need to have public investments to align what our priorities look like for the district.
Yeah, I think you must have connected with Under 3 already, because that's exactly what they told me. And that's exactly what the council member has directed me to include on her wish list. So that's definitely top priority.
Yeah, great.
And Ali has shared a few awesome things in the chat, which are very helpful. Thanks so much, Ali. The budget hearing calendar, and as well as council members' letter to the mayor. That was super helpful. And again, same like basically the wish list that I was pulling from. Yeah. Are there any other questions I can assess?
So I think that Ali, I think you had also gotten me a PDF of that's the same letter, Councilmember Nadeau's budget priorities. And I do want to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong. One thing that I had seen in that letter, but also heard from her messaging is, while the things she identified in her priorities, which I think is something our committee has also really tried to lift up, especially homeless youth services. I appreciate Commissioner Brown lifting up that parity and pay. I think that's something that we really need to, is something that doesn't get talked on. And I think that's really, from what I see from the letter that Councilmember Nadeau did, but she also echoed that she would be supporting many of the asks that have been going around from the advocacy groups around mental health, around all of the big overarching out of school time services, that these were just particular issues that hadn't been lifted up. Is that the same letter, Ally? Just double checking.
Oh, yes, that's the same letter. So
Okay.
you have the PDF and we tweeted
And then
it.
you send the link. Great. The council. If it's okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just throw it to folks to ask, because I could ask questions all night long. So I'm gonna actually just shift it. I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna start with Renee, sort of working clockwise. If there's anything, and I especially think because you, Renee, have really been phenomenal in lifting up diverse learning and neuro differences and things that have just been wonderfully edifying for me, and I really appreciate all that you've done on that space. And so any questions and anything you might want to start us off with would be great.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? I'll try to make this brief. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a single parent that relocated to Ward 1 by way of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. And I've been a resident at in a housing property development that was developed at George and Lamont. And we've been here since 2013. So we literally moved from Ward 8, where we could not find, without incurring a lot of cost, access to disability related healthcare services initially. For instance, when my 16 and my 12-year-olds were diagnosed, we were traveling across the city to do autism related therapeutic solutions. But we were traveling from Ward 8 to Ward 1. We were traveling to Georgetown. We were traveling to Children's National. So one of my first big, deep issues is the intersection between the medical necessity of utilizing Medicaid and other federal programs that support people with disabilities, like the Affordable Care Act, ACA, and then also looking at how as my kids age within their disability as they go through the lifespan. One of the situations that we're facing as my 16-year-old ages into needing adult related services, that currently Washington, D.C. is only one of 4 states or one of 4 municipalities that has a IQ test as being their determiner as whether or not your child transitions from educational services into the adult disability system. RSA, it's the difference between having a work shadow experience with someone in the short term when they age out of the educational system and they go into adulthood, versus having supports through the lifespan. So one really, really big piece of thing that I'm developing language about talking about is how can we convince the city to use something other than IQ testing as a determiner of whether or not children with disabilities receive adult related services. So that's a big piece I know it's a multi-year discussion and multi-sector problem. In the short term, as she still is a 16-year-old and I still have a 12-year-old that are still in the educational system, COVID has really thrown a wrench into our what should have been a hearty discussion about transitioning educationally from an inclusion, from having a lot of educational supports at school to having more of an inclusion model for middle school and for high school. So one of the things about working with PAVE is been trying to find my voice and trying to find my pool of advocacy that intersects between my disability rights and disability related activism and the overall global system of educating all learners in DCPS. So so I'd like to continue to converse with any folks in our ward about issues that relate to disability, issues that relate to education, and especially if we look at how are we going to do a recovery from COVID for the older disabled children, older learners in the system. What is what does adherence to federal guidelines for education look like post-COVID? If you had a child that had a IEP or individual education program, if you had a teenager that was about to transition into the adult disability system, and then how did COVID impact our disability community within Ward 1 at writ large? So I know that's a big group of issues, but this is my chance. I had to shoot my shot, I had to, looking at, but I like to continue to converse about the specifics that affect these not normally thought of communities. Ability, equity, and gender, and how social services.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Renee. That's so appreciated. And I think you were on the meeting when we met with you with PAVE and Councilmember. Yeah, okay. And she wore her purple, yeah. Yeah, she thinks very highly of PAVE, and that was a wonderful meeting. And again, thank you so much for sharing that information. As you know, the chancellor has said multiple times, we want to include students of all backgrounds and abilities. And while that's great, there still needs to be more people like you, Renee, that kind of come forward and talk about that experience, just so they have a better idea of really how to cater to this. It makes me frustrated because I feel like a lot of the education cluster feels like they have a handle on it. But again, I know I'm saying this again, but sharing stories and experiences really does help. And at least on my end, for the legislative side, I know the legislative staffers that work in the education committee, and they really do take the time to read all testimony given, submitted, left on the voicemail, and that is all taken into account, especially they have oversight over DCPS and OSSI in particular. I'm personally not that familiar with IEPs and but there's someone else on our staff that actually oversees the disability portfolio within the Committee on Human Services, and I would love to connect you because this is kind of like where our jobs come together, because he has the disability background, I have the education background, and again, please sign up to testify for the education cluster, because your background and information is so needed and is so helpful as we oversee these agencies that we're looking for to give us a product. And that product needs to be exactly what our community needs. And they won't know what that product must be until we tell them.
Just to quickly support what Raleigh said, and also say that I do need to jump off, unfortunately. But I want to emphasize the piece that Raleigh said, which is that, Renee, I don't want you to think you had to shoot your shot, because this is the one conversation. Like, I'll put my contact in the chat, and you can always write directly to the council member or to any of us. Like Raleigh said, she could only do her. I mean, I watch her do it. I just watch in awe. But we can only do our job as your ward council member's office if we hear what the constituents want and need, and have that point of view. So I also want to thank you for sharing.
No, but I want to just, again, sort of as we're having this conversation about budgets, I think, it's really important. And again, I'm going to say it doesn't start in this week, it doesn't start in this month. It's a continuum to just keep iterating and reiterating that this is where we need to double down in our budget spending, because at the end of the day, this is where we're falling short, and the gap, not just for racial, but also in learning and neuro differences and everything. This is where we are, and we're getting even further in COVID. So I think as we're having this budget conversation, I really lifting it up, and bye, Allie. So thank you, Renee. I know, again, I have learned so much from you, Renee. and also it has really shifted my advocacy efforts as well. And when I talk about funding, it's a very different conversation. And we know that these budgets take nuances. Um, so yeah, thank you. I know we've lost a couple people. Um, I do have a couple questions, but I want to sort of throw it to Commissioner Lehman Morales because I think you have not asked yet.
I don't have any pertinent questions. I mean, this is, I probably should have mentioned this in during my introduction, but this is my first term, so I'm just more so trying to learn as much as I can about these issues. That's why I decided to join this committee as well as others, just to kind of fill myself in on what I've been missing out on. But yeah, everything that's been talked about so far, it seems fine. I don't, like I said, I'm not like super into the weeds and on the legislative end, so I don't know where I would even start to ask my questions. But no, I mean, I do appreciate what all the speakers so far have said about these issues. And if I do, as I'm sure Mr. Millick can attest to, I'm not shy about asking questions or making myself heard. So if I do think of something, I'll let you guys know. But I think right now everything's been covered just fine by everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that I would ask, and I guess again, sort of speaking to Councilmember Nadeau's, your role as our legislative staff. I mean, we lost the Committee on Education, and so we're really relying heavily on the Committee of the Whole to lift up the issues. And I think sort of, yes, budget, but also sort of to some of the points that Renee was making, that we do have a lot of separate issues that are really important and really require accountability, oversight, excuse me, but also questions from our community. And I'm wondering sort of how do you and where is your office going to sort of help and position itself to lift up those conversations now that we don't have a committee on education? Like what are you sort of envisioning for that?
Yeah, and I am dealing with this transition as difficult as you. The former committee director for education, Akeem, is a great friend, and we worked really close together, and I relied on him heavily, and I knew I relied on him heavily, and I was counting down the days that I had him still working here, and it's definitely a transition. I honestly don't know how the chairman is handling all of this, all the education work, because without that committee on education, I mean, there's like 4 staffers less on these issues.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's basically a point person that handles all things DCPS, and that's Lakeisha, who is doing a bang up job on very little sleep. And then there's a point person that handles kind of everything Aussie/UDC, and that's Christina. And then I think everything else is kind of just filtered within their assistants and their staff. But one thing I didn't talk about, and I was like, oh, I need to talk about one more thing. And you also—
Sorry, just to clarify for everybody, Christina Sutlow at Mendelssohn's office, and I apologize, I don't know Lakeisha's last name.
Yep, Lakeisha Jackson. I will put the link to their contacts.
Okay, and I also have their contacts, and yeah, but both at a Mendelssohn's office now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Lakeisha Jordan. So I'm gonna put that contact in the chat.
Great. And they've been, just for folks, they have been doing a listening tour across communities on behalf of the committee. I don't know if I should air quote it. Should I air quote it? For education. But those are the two that I've seen doing that cycle or that rotation.
Yeah, and I participated in the Ward 1 cluster. And it was the day before we had the CFSA oversight hearing. So it was kind of in the background as I was putting together questions in my memo. But yes, I'm honestly it's 3 months in. I'm very impressed with how much work they've done, especially from home, especially during the pandemic, especially with learning loss, especially now that so they've had the reach out listening sessions, and I'm really impressed with the fact that they've already had several hearings and roundtables on all of these topics. What I'm disappointed with is the audacity for certain government witnesses to appear at these roundtables and say, I don't know, I don't have the plan. I don't have a plan. But the roundtable is like, okay, so what's the plan? And then certain government witnesses come, who are very nice people, by the way, say, I don't know, we don't have a plan. We're formulating and we're addressing and we're thinking and we're progressing in the idea of maybe one day like it's just like a thesaurus of like, there's no plan. So after that one tragic hearing, I was glad that they had a part 2. Basically, it was like, okay, now you guys have like 3 weeks to get it together, and what's the plan? So they came back, and it was more of like a feel good. Okay, there's a plan coming, and we'll let you know in April. Okay, well then in April it's going to be like, what's the plan? So now we need to have a plan. And we're looking for like a plan for the summer, and clearly they haven't even gotten to like next fall. My boss would like to see for term 4, at the beginning of term 4, have a spot for every student that would like a spot. But next fall is gonna be, I feel like, crunch time to make sure 100% if your child wants a spot, they have to have a spot at school. One thing I wanted to also add is tutoring. There's going to be a significant increase in tutoring, and so we have clinician increase, tutoring increase.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard of an organization called City Year. They provide
A little bit.
Yeah. Do you work with them?
No, but I am tutoring and
AmeriCorps
mentoring
alum.
has been this committee's big.
Okay, I think it's after hours, and so I'm able to say this. So I'm on the board of City Year, and I'm like very pro City Year. So they are increasing their ask for the fall for increased tutoring because they actually have had 3 times as many schools request them, and which is great.
Yes.
I mean, we're dealing with learning loss. The kids are getting back in school. We need tutoring. This is a group that provides tutoring. So.
But you
Can I
but you know what you
real quick, because you are actually bringing up another topic that
Okay.
this particular committee has, and again, last year we had a huge outreach to recruit volunteers for tutoring. So I'm going to put a pin on that. If we have extra time, even if I can grab you later, I would love to have this conversation. But I'm going to let Renee, because she raised her hand. But you are just about to get into my big thing is tutoring, mentoring, huge. Renee, please.
No, that's all. I was about to ask that we call it parking lot, right? After school time.
I will not be
after
parking
school
it,
and
just
out
so
of school.
we're clear. There's no parking lot. It's not going to
Yes.
hang out with the Farleys and the, Pintos.
Yeah. Well, I just want to amplify the request to look carefully at the issue of law, quote unquote, language loss or academic loss, and to float a lot of the that people who have children with complex IEPs and or in my case, children who actually have private placements that are out of the jurisdiction, meaning that their special needs are so severe that the traditional public DC public schools and the traditional public charter schools can't meet their needs. That that I really feel that our population of kiddos that are in the medical or educational needs aren't going to be fully addressed with the dissolution of the educational committee. It's actually really hard to get our caucus of families that are in those communities to coalesce on any issue, because we don't have a common bond of, or common denominator of a specific ward or a specific school. You know, our listings of needs are multi-jurisdictional and definitely correspond across all areas of the city. That's why I'm really concerned that this idea of dissolving a citywide educational committee makes it harder to interact with the parental voice of communities like ours, which would be challenged because we're not going to have the obvious collating thing of a common school system or a common school, because we're dispersed. So I'd like to know if we could actually just welcome having the more attention played to the parents' voice within each individual council member's staff. Is there a way to fund or designate staff that are specific to parent voice? Because I don't necessarily feel it's going to be heard necessarily unless you're part of a larger group like PAVE. You know, the ordinary parent's not going to think committee of the whole. That's where I should bring my testimony about education. Community of the whole, that's not where I should bring my testimony about difficulty with Medicaid, navigating Medicaid or navigating medical services. So let me hold for that question, but.
Thank you so much for raising that. And this was definitely a point that the council, was faced with last year with, Grasso stepping away from the council. Unfortunately, there's only one person that can make that decision, and that person is Phil Mendelson. And it is 100% in his hands. And he has decided, previous to Grasso leaving, that he would connect COW and community education. Yeah. This was kind of in foresight of him seeing that Grasso would step back. So he knew to start to get acquainted with these issues, and he also wanted his staff to get acquainted with these issues. That will not change, unfortunately, for a few years. Until there is another council member that is not on their first term, that is then able to have a committee. We're so excited to now have new council members, including Councilmember Pinto and Councilmember George and Councilmember Henderson at the council. However, new council members are not able to have committees. So I don't want to speak out of term, but there's some push and chatter and excitement for the possibility for when Councilmember Henderson is able to have a committee, she can take over education. She previously served as the committee director for education, and she's very familiar and well-versed in these issues years ago. Then she worked on the Hill, and now she's back. Process hasn't really changed. So, I know that her staff can get her up to speed on what's happening. I've been very impressed to see her attend basically every single hearing. All of them actually have been attending every single hearing. And as they should, they don't have a committee. So it's great to see them really involved. But to answer your question, unfortunately, one person has made that decision. He's already made that decision, and that's not going to change for any time soon. However, the best way to tell Phil that he needs these particular staffers to get out in the community and talk to parents and teachers and then bring their voices into the council is if you testify at this hearing and you literally testify and then you say, look at me, Mr. Chairman, I'm talking to you right now. Here's what I need from you. Best way to reach him, because then his staffers have to listen and then his staffers take notes, and that's also all included into the official record. And you can't deny an official record.
I I really appreciate you saying that. I think that's a really good note, and I just made it in my book amongst many others as we're going through. I do know I did reach out. I think that Ward 1 conversation was not publicly noticed. So I think, and we did raise that up, and so I'm confident that in the future we'll get more notice when they do these Ward 1. But I appreciate Raleigh, and I think actually that's a really great observation. And Renee, happy to work with you on that. And Commissioner, and sorry, I think before your hand went up, and I don't want to jump ahead, I know Commissioner Brown had written a lot in about community schools and community investments in that sort of wraparound services. I know Cardoza has one, and then Bancroft had a sort of collaborative cross partnership with Mary Center. And it's been something I know the mayor has actually been lifting up in schools with high risk populations. And again, I when I say at risk, I'm going to air quote that, because there's the legislative and the technical turn. But as we know, it doesn't capture all the needs in our communities. So I just want to throw that out if I may. But yeah, I think Commissioner Brown has articulated it well when we're talking about children in our communities with economic, social, and emotional issues. And yes, I think DCPS and all of our schools, these are really not just critical touch points, but they're where a lot of trust lives with families, especially when we're dealing with immigrant families and families that don't have traditional access points outside of the school. So thank you. I don't know if that sorry, I was reading, processing, note taking.
And you're completely right. And I feel like I'm giving a lot of props. I'm also bringing a lot of people down here. And I've got to give props to the teachers. I mean, we'd be nowhere without them. And they are incredibly patient and incredibly well trained and incredibly underpaid for what they do. They're like, I mean, they're doing whatever. I can go on all day about teachers. They're great. So they are very, very well trained to spot the tiniest thing, even through the screen. And even Councilmember was saying earlier today that she has 2 daughters, and one of them is in pre-K3 online and in daycare. And one of the teachers called her and was like, "Hey, your daughter didn't do like the whale dance that she always loves. So what's going on?" And she's like, "What? She didn't do the whale dance. Hold on, what's going on?" So they're just like, "So like, is everything okay at home? Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And so we rely on them to look at the 4 corners of the screen at every single child and see what's happening in their background. And they've gone through extensive teachings about how to spot things. And this is just like a very left comment I'm about to make within my like CFSA portfolio within the committee. So we're dealing with a lot of, there's a severe decline in hotline child abuse neglect calls, like 62% decrease. And this has been—
Sorry, was that 62%?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so COVID hit. Everyone went home for what we thought was 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, boom, steep decline in child abuse and neglect hotline calls. We, I can, and also it's online, the council pre-hearing responses, but I think it's around 60 to 80% of those calls come from teachers. And so without students being able to have those touch points at school, it's like, oh my God, well, what's going on? So then that's when DCPS, CFSA, OSSI kind of got together and implemented that intense tutoring of how to spot problematic issues on the screen for kids. So it's a little bit better. Tune into the CFSA oversight and see how that's going. And with respect to at-risk kids, which the DME considers on track for academic failure, which I hate that statement. But I mean, a lot of the youth in care contribute to the at-risk grouping that we have in the district. So we have I think it's 500,000 for tutoring, 500,000 for mentoring. These kids still have a GPA of 1.9 on average. This is completely unacceptable to me. And I ask every year, okay, well, what are you doing? How are we going to change this? And I'm sorry, I went really left into CFSA stuff.
I have to say, I actually really appreciate it. It's a conversation I hear from teachers.
Mhm.
So it's we hear anecdotally, but not knowing the statistics attached, the data attached to what I hear from teachers. You know, yeah, this is great. I appreciate having the numbers and the data side of this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, the hearings are so important because every single year, for now years, there's been so much talk about this one program. It's called the Grandparent Caregiver Program. So basically, we want all kids in the district to not come into foster care, but stay with a relative, and then the district will pay a certain stipend for a close relative or grandparent. There are, I want to say, almost 100 people waiting on the grandparent caregiver list. Last night, we were able to program $800,000 to eliminate this waiting list, which is huge. We've been waiting for years, but it's because so much testimony has come through of like, how come there's so much money and there's all people waiting for benefits and kids involved. So again, please come forward. Please share testimony, even just submit testimony. You don't even have to show up, but it's just so important to have that ongoing conversation, because then we understand where to put our priorities and where to put money, and to, as I'm going back to Commissioner Brown, and hold them accountable.
Yeah. I'm saving this chat. And when I say I'm going to save this chat, it means I'm going to use my best technological powers to try to figure out how to save it. Because I think Commissioner Brown is lifting up a lot of really great questions. Renee, Mary Center, yes. I do want to get Commissioner Lehman Morales had a question, and I want to make sure we get that answered. I could keep you here all night and talk all of these issues. I do want to just lift up, and we can talk about it after. I'm not going to keep you all night. I swear I could, but I won't. But I want to just, because we brought you here for budget, I'm going to point to Commissioner Lehman Morales and let him.
Well, I didn't raise my hand to speak about the budget. At least I don't think.
Fine.
But yeah, my question goes back to the legislative aspect of all of this that we've been talking about. And like I said at the onset, I'm new, so I'm still figuring how the system here works, and how, like, where the levers and levers of power are. The levers of power are, how the machinery works. So we've been talking a lot about the Committee of the Whole and the abolition of the Committee on Education, and the importance of hearings and testimony, and et cetera. Personally, I'm a big proponent of the inside-outside strategy of, you go to the proper channels legislatively to get, to push change forward, while in conjunction you have activists and organizations on the ground who are agitating to get those legislators or other individuals, other stakeholders at play to get on board with your ideas and stuff. So looking back to the Committee on the Whole and the issue of the Committee of Education, Riley, you talked a lot about the importance of having people come to these hearings and provide testimony, and I get that's important. I fully am in support of doing so. Don't get me wrong. And again, this might be my own ignorance of how City Council here works, but what I'm trying to figure or wrap my mind around is is there anything that the city councilors themselves can do to change these rules or get something going? I mean, you said that the power of bringing back the Committee on the Whole or Committee on Education basically rests with just one person. That's Chairman Mendelson. And while I understand that it, within the rules of the council, that might be the case, I'm trying to figure out why the council members individually, and I don't want to call out Councilmember Nadeau on this necessarily, but I want to understand why that's the only option, I guess. Like, why are, if the city councilors are city councils for a reason, I feel like they should have some more say or weight on navigating these things than the normal residents of DC. Like, why should the council members be so reliant on individuals coming to these hearings and providing testimony and really agitating for these things when, their actual elected officials have more power technically by being council members? Like, I'm just trying to figure out why, if there are venues or options that the council members themselves have as a group to get around this. Because if there aren't, and we're solely relying on people just showing up to meetings and hearings, that sounds nice. I'm all for people powered and having the people do the work here, but at the same time, these are our elected officials, and they should have some sort of weight on the council, on the chairman and the council as a whole, right? So I'm just trying to, if you could, educate me on that in terms of like what the council member, in this instance, I guess, in Councilmember Nadeau's case, what she can do as a council member to kind of, I don't know, change the rules or get some sort of conversation going to change the rules around that requirement that only freshmen, that freshmen can't chair committees, and therefore, given the composition we have now, we can't have the committee at the moment. I'm just trying to figure out what, like I said, I'm all for involving individuals and people as stakeholders, because, and another thing is, we're talking about education. Education is, is an issue that shouldn't be bipartisan or shouldn't be controversial. It's something that everybody has kids, most people have kids or know kids, and, so education is something that crosses all sorts of sectors, and it's a very intersectional subject. So I'm just trying to figure out what power the city council itself has to do something about this instead of just relying on individual participation.
Thank you so much for that question and comment, Commissioner. So I can also go into the makeup of the council and the rules and procedure, but I think you're talking about more of like a procedural aspect, which the council actually voted on a while ago, and to change those rules and procedure would be like a completely different conversation. So not only does the chairman, has he decided to make education under the cow, he also assigns committees. So he could have easily assigned my boss Committee on Health, and she would be like, wait, what? And but he does try to have a conversation with every council member. He tries to gauge, do you want to stay with the same committee? What do you see? And not only does he assign committees, he assigns committee assignments. So some council members are on certain committees, and at the new council period, they find themselves not on those committees and on other committees and a participant on other committees. And is there, upset feelings? Yes, but that's part of the procedural process that they have all agreed to. So, and
I just want to interject real quick. None of this is codified, if I'm not mistaken. There is nothing official that says you couldn't have a freshman council member chair.
Sure, and that's a great topic. It's a little out of my wheelhouse, but I would definitely.
We can definitely pick that up, but yeah. I do want to be very clear that it's not codified.
And a great contact would be, I put it in the chat, under Mendelson's staff, his ledge director and committee directors, Evan Cash, and could write a thesis on this topic.
I have to say, Evan Cash is amazing. Like, every time I want to know anything, he open meeting policy, he gives it down. He gives he's got diagrams. He's amazing.
Absolutely, he's great. So I definitely recommend reaching out to him, because he can provide a lot more information on this topic. But when it comes to kind of education portfolio and budget workshop, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me. But with respect to the procedural committee procedure,
Evan Cash
would be the best
to go to. So he's the one that we should hold up on the pyre and like dangle.
Yeah.
So I
He's
just,
great.
we have, and again, I still want to talk to you about tutoring and mentoring, like, but it is already, we've had you for an hour. I want to give Commissioner Brown one last question, and then if it's okay, maybe we can identify some next points. And Renee, you had brought up a conversation that you'd like to see continued. We could maybe talk about like just who we do next. So Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Raleigh, for staying on as long as you have. This question, because I know the council member is Human Services Chairman and wanted to go back to the child welfare piece, because I know that like a significant amount of our foster children go beyond the city lines because we don't have enough foster parents in the city. And, you know, I know the council members' priority is around affordable housing. And, you know, I think that we could create some fabulous opportunities in Ward 1 for children to remain close to their birth homes. So I just wanted to just put that at the top of your list because I've seen her kind of, you know, really try to address this with CFSA, but I really haven't seen a lot of progress on this. Is, you know, how can we, and I don't know if it's like through foster care assistance or through other kind of incentive programs, maybe like recruitment, foster care recruitment, like how can we support affordable housing opportunities or like just overall housing opportunities for foster youth to remain in the city? And that's just like my last comment there. So I just hope that you could put that in the top of your ask or just key considerations.
You know, it would be excellent if you can sign up to testify at the budget oversight hearing, because ANCs actually have, and Commissioner Morales, this is great to know, ANCs have their own special panel. And Commissioner Brown, that would be so helpful. And
Yeah.
I know that Councilman Bernardo is very keen on housing opportunities, especially as it relates to CFSA. And you know, if you have any questions that you would like to see her ask Director Donald, please send them my way. I'm always open for advocates, constituents, anyone to forward questions. And 99% of the time, they make it onto her memo, which she has okayed previous to me sending it to CFSA, and she asks every question.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we were trying to do in this committee is to draft a resolution to respond to the budget. So, you know, we're trying to get great weight through the commission in order to lift that up. So, you know, in addition to testifying, we're also going to send you something for the councilman to consider for this budget.
Yeah, and I would like to, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Commissioner Brown, because in addition to the foster, I know that our homeless youth has been, and again, I just really want to thank you, Council Member Nadeau, whoever put that in her priorities. Like, she has brought up the homeless youth and made that a priority, and also made it a forward issue so other folks are seeing it. I've seen that presented, which I really appreciate. But I know that there's an issue with transitional housing. I don't know, and I would just ask again, because I think a major goal is to echo a lot of what the advocacy and coalition groups that are already doing the work in our community are saying. And I'm wondering, have you been working with the Homeless Youth Coalition?
So I don't deal, my topics don't deal with anything involving homeless or disability, unfortunately, just because those are 3 agencies within our committee. So everything about youth and care, that's me. Everything
So
about
homeless youth.
Yeah. So
that intersection.
Yep. So let me connect you with our committee director, Ben, who kind of his area is everything homeless. And because those youth are not in care, I don't have that touch point to give you those that information that I wish I could provide. But Ben Davis, who is our committee director, I can put his contact in the chat.
Okay.
he would be like the best contact because he deals with these issues regularly.
Okay. No, that's actually really helpful because I think sort of as we've been looking at it as a committee, it's all lumped together, right? Like we see all of these intersections. So it's helpful to know who's doing what. And we will definitely reach out to Ben. I know that transitional housing aspect for youth, and making sure that we're covering affordable housing for transitioning out, who are still students, who are still, it's a difficult. So yes, that's fantastic. I'll reach out to Ben Davis on that. I'm also really interested in your disability person, and it sounds like tutoring and mentoring is living with you.
So
Okay.
if for youth in care, yes.
Okay.
For DCPS, district public charter, yes.
That's you. So I know, so, and again, like, last year we've had ongoing issues that we've been dealing with, tutoring and mentoring being one of them. One of the big things, and I think you had touched on it budget wise, is recovery, right? And leaning into this tutoring, leading into, and I know the term being thrown out now is high dose
Yeah.
tutoring.
Right.
Great. Tutoring, mentoring, we cannot rest it all on our teachers' shoulders. I'd love to talk to you more about that, if that's possible, but not tonight, because we've already taken up a ton of your time. But we would love to talk to you about the process of also getting access to volunteers, because I think a big issue we had before COVID was there weren't enough volunteers to fill those tutoring spots. So as wonderful as they are and as important as they are, we need people to fill those spots as well. But that's that. I think we've covered everything. We've taken so much of your time, and I really, this
It's
is
budget
just,
season. We don't sleep for 3 months.
I know you don't, which is why I want to give you just a minute to eat.
Oh yeah, we don't eat, we don't sleep for 3 months. That's what recess is for.
Well, I don't want to take any more time than we have to.
No, it's been a pleasure. So please, reach out to our committee, email me if you have follow-up questions. I'll be looking for all of you to sign up for CFSA, education cluster, the whole thing. I'm sure, let me know, filter any questions through Allie, because she regularly attends these meetings. I have my own education meetings that I attend. I'm kind of the guest star here for her meetings. So thank you so much, Commissioners, for everything you do. Thank you for giving time back to the community. And please stay safe.
No, you're amazing. And I'll tell you, we've been providing testimony and everything. Look forward to it. And yes, if you don't mind, I will follow up with some of these I don't know why I have to show you all my notes. It's just,
that's great.
But I will follow up with these notes.
Perfect.
Just the people that you mentioned. I promise I won't drill and kill, or whatever the saying is. I just have a couple of follow-ups. And of course, anybody online, if you have any questions, you can either connect with Ms. Lancaster directly, or if you want, I can put together a list and we can send it off to her if that works better. Great.
Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank
Please
you
stay
so
safe.
much, and get a little sleep, please.
July.
And I'm happy to stay on for anyone who's still on the line, the remaining two. We did have a couple other agenda items, which, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a 30-minute meeting. It's going to be fantastic. Anything else from this conversation that you'd like me to follow up on? Renee, I, as always, love your questions, and I have, again, circled you, and I'm going to circle it again to connect you with the disability legislation person for Ninja's office.
Yes. Yep. Oh
And
my
I,
goodness. But thank you. And I'm learning. Again, I'm a newbie as well. I'm learning. Um, we call
I'm
it
dubious of that statement, by the way.
well, just
If
well,
we were
we
in
all
that
sometimes
card
we all,
game, I'd call BS.
well, it's just that COVID has made everybody need to find a new roadmap. You know, what we thought was working prior to COVID, post COVID may not work. And so we don't want to go back to the old normal. We want to recreate a new way, you know. So
I'm
that's why
glad
we're
you said that.
saying
I don't accept let's return to normal.
Yes. Oh, old normal wasn't working for people with disabilities, and old normal wasn't working for folks with economic challenges in our ward. But
You
the
know,
new normal,
I'll be very
meaning-
honest, it was
yeah.
working just fine for my kids. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh my goodness.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
no,
And-
you're
and
right.
then
The
generationally
normal
too,
wasn't,
yeah.
old normal wasn't working. It wasn't. So I don't
Yeah,
accept the
absolutely.
return to normal concept at all. At all.
Yes,
And I don't
yes,
even,
yes.
you know, and I will say, and Commissioner, you know, I've had people reach out to me about the return to the full 5-day.
Yeah.
And you know, for us as a committee to weigh in on, and I was very honest, I said, I don't think that's something we can weigh in on.
Yeah.
Um,
It's well good for in this ward. I bet there's such a diversity of kiddos in all different parts of the educational sector. You know, especially the kids who don't even go to school in the same ward they live in. You know, so it's a pretty broad map. But
it's
but the
really
common
complicated.
denominators, the common denominators for all of our kiddos are always going to be what happens once the school bell ends. So out of school and after
Yeah.
school time and funding. Credit recovery in terms of summer or high dosage tutoring is a common denominator we'll have. And again, family stabilization, post-COVID family stabilization, you know, that's look differently, whether it's a medically stable or financially stable with the social services, a safety net. You know, those are the things that we're going to be able to caucus around within our ward, even though we may have all experienced COVID differently through our lenses, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. And I know that for our committee, the focus has really been on these externalities.
Okay.
It's like you said, there's so much within the school, and our community is so diverse. But what we know as commissioners is that it is so diverse, and those needs have to be met. The school level, we know they have to be met, but we can't control the school. You know what I mean? Like it's just. And come to think of it, we can't control the district government either.
Yeah. Yes. Wow.
But we do have great weight on these externalities, and the internal stuff is so. I don't know. I would be happy to weigh in on it. I would just need more help, to be honest. I'm
Yeah. Yep.
stretched thin. I'm
Hey,
open.
well, I'm your girl. I'm learning though, so I'm hoping to be more in your corner this year, huh?
Please do. I
Yep.
think, you know, and that's the thing. I think it's a really, you know, we have a slightly different approach and angle than than the parent led. And that was the conversation. And Commissioner, please chime in if there are any questions, if I'm, but that was a conversation I had with one of the parents tonight. I said, you know, in theory, we have a Ward 1 parent group.
Yes.
Let's leverage them to do that, and then we can do that out, and we can all work together like this, right? And just
Yeah.
But us sort of coming out, I am, and I say this, I'm the only parent on our commission. So I'm
Wow.
very
Yeah, yeah.
reticent to speak for all parents, if that makes sense, and to have our commission speak for all parents, unless we have that parent voice come in and really tell us what they need. But we're not, the mental health, you know, I have my personal issues, right? But I can't, I'm not hearing an overwhelming push to get kids back in school 5 days a week, every kid. What I do hear is our kids don't have out of school time. Our kids don't have this. I'm not hearing parents in my ward and in my area say we want 5 days a week. So do you see what I'm saying? And that's kind of where I stand on this committee. And if I had a bunch of parents who were like, we need to all go back to school 5 days a week, I'd be like,
Yep.
Okay,
Wow.
can we get other,
So-
you know, but I
but-
don't get that in our ward.
Right,
don't.
right. Wow.
I don't know if you are hearing that. Commissioner, are you hearing that from any constituents?
No, but I was going to ask you. You bring up a good point. It was something I was not aware of, that you were the only parent on our commission.
Well, Dottie is a parent. I'm the only parent with kids in school.
Yeah, fair. No, what I was gonna ask is if that's the case, if we don't really have like a direct line of sorts to parents. Like from my understanding, and this is going back to my own experience outside of DC, like most public schools or schools in general have some sort of like parent teacher association or some sort of school board or whatever, some sort of mechanism that parents can involve themselves and play a part in the decision-making process, etc.
Oh, Commissioner, you're singing my song.
You probably know where I'm going with this, but so I know we have fantastic organizations like PAVE and other organizations that do sort of this sort of work, but since so go back to this earlier, since we don't have parents with kids actively in school on our commission, or just I mean generally just across the board. I don't want to speak for the composition of all the other agencies, but is there a way that we could perhaps get in touch or link up with like the parent teacher boards or school boards, whatever the proper terminology is of these schools, to kind of get them to see like, hey, this is we
I'm
are
going to jump in on this just because I'm going to save you.
Okay.
Because I know exactly what you're asking. So actually, when I started this committee, I was a PTO president. I led the PTO. I worked with Tubman's and so I was actually part of the initial Ward 1 Education Collaborative, which was basically comprised of and PTO, PTA, it's different forms. And that's a whole other conversation because they're not 501c3s, except for Bancroft, which I finalized. And then Tubman, I also, sorry for that ridiculous hair. And then Tubman, I helped finalize their 501c3, but they didn't have the capacity to continue it. And then Bruce Monroe. So what happened was years ago, we had all these parent leaders, but they leave. They go off to different schools. They don't stay in the schools past second, third grade. And most of them look like me. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So you don't have long-term parent engagement and consistency. And the parents that are there long-term, they're busy. They're, and so that engagement has been a historic challenge. And I used to call it the tipping point, which is when you have a certain amount of parents who, and it's parents who have the luxury of time, We'll leave it at that. Who can be engaged, who can spend the money, who can do all the things that need to be done to keep these organizations running. So that was a challenge, and I think that's where we are with a lot. We're at the tipping point for a lot of the 1A schools. Now, Czech has a private or has its own separate nonprofit board attached to it. The woman who runs it lives in Ward 3, and she's lovely. She's lovely. Okay, I got to figure out how to say it. But yeah, so to your point, yes, they have not. So that's what I was talking to Renee about. So I had started this Ward 1 education collaborative with other Ward 1 women, all women. We're always women, right? And what ended up happening is at some point, it ended up becoming the Ward 1 Ed Council. There was a little bit of, like, I just didn't have the capacity to do it anymore on top of everything else. But they got very involved with